I was watching TV in the family room when my son-in-law walked in and turned it off without a word. The silence landed like a slap. "Go to your room, old woman," he said casually, already reaching for the fridge. "This living room is mine now." I didn't answer. I was sitting in my green velvet armchair, the one I bought with the first Social Security check I received after my husband died 15 years ago. It was worn at the arms and faded where the sun hit it in the afternoons. But it was mine. The coffee I had poured 10 minutes earlier was cooling on the side table. The kitchen still smelled faintly of peach cobbler. The evening news had been murmuring softly before the screen went black. This was my quiet hour. The time when my joints loosened. My thoughts slowed, and I didn't belong to anyone. Jason Miller stood in front of the television like a man blocking a window. He was already unbuttoning the top of his shirt. His tie loosened, his posture loose with entitlement. He didn't even look at me after turning the screen off. In his world, my presence didn't require acknowledgement. Behind him, my daughter Emily stepped inside, arms full of shopping bags. Her shoulders were hunched, her eyes fixed on the floor, as if she were apologizing for taking up space in her own childhood home. I didn't move, I didn't speak. Jason clicked his tongue when he noticed I hadn't obeyed. "I've got the game on tonight," he added, louder now. "The family room is mine." The word mine echoed longer than it should have. I slowly lifted my eyes and looked at Emily. She stood frozen in the kitchen doorway, her knuckles white around the bag handles. When our eyes met, I waited. I didn't need a speech. I didn't need a fight. I needed one sentence. "Don't you dare talk to my mother like that. This is her house." Emily looked down and adjusted one of the bags, pretending something inside had shifted. That small movement struck harder than his words. Something in me went quiet, not the hurt kind of quiet, but the clear kind, the kind that arrives when confusion leaves. 35 years working at the county recorder's office teaches you many things. The most important is this: words can be denied. Documents cannot. I stood up. My knees clicked softly in the silence. The sound sharp and final, like a stamp on paper. Jason was already sprawled on my couch now, flipping channels, cracking open a soda without asking. He had long ago stopped seeing me as a person. I was furniture, background noise, a utility that functioned best when silent. I walked past him and into my bedroom. I didn't lock the door. I didn't sit on the bed and cry. I went straight to the dresser and pulled open the bottom drawer. Beneath folded sweaters and old scarves was a stiff leather pouch I kept for bank documents. Inside it, wrapped with a blue elastic band, was the folder. The deed. The bill of sale. The title. Owner Margaret Whitman. The paper was yellowed at the edges, but its authority was absolute. I looked at myself in the mirror. Short gray hair, glasses on a chain, linen trousers, a navy blouse. I looked like the kind of grandmother people underestimate. That had always been my advantage. As long as grandma keeps feeding the wolves, they think they're kings. The moment the pot is lifted off the fire, the crown turns soft. I returned to the family room. The sports channel was blaring now. Jason had turned the volume up, legs stretched out, fully settled. Emily was in the kitchen, clattering dishes unnecessarily, choosing motion over courage. I walked toward the front door. Jason glanced over his shoulder and smirked. "Taking a stroll, Maggie?" he said. "Don't get lost. At your age." I didn't respond. I turned the deadbolt. For a brief second, I looked around the room, the framed print of the Savannah riverfront. The rug I vacuumed every Saturday. My son-in-law's back. My daughter's shadow in the kitchen. I touched the keys in my pocket. The metal felt cold and steady. I stepped outside and closed the door quietly, firmly, like placing a period at the end of a sentence. The air was crisp. I locked the gate from the outside and walked down the block to the avenue. A cab pulled up almost immediately. "Where to?" the driver asked. "The Grand Hyatt downtown," I said. As the city lights slid past the window, I took out my phone and scrolled to a name I hadn't called in years but trusted completely. Robert H. Caldwell, attorney at law. He answered on the second ring. "Margaret, it's late." "I woke up," I said, "and I need your help." There was a pause. Tell me. I need to evict 2 tenants. Silence again. Then, you live with your daughter. Exactly. Another pause. Longer this time. He knew me well enough to hear the certainty in my voice. What happened? He told me to go to my room. Said the living room was his now. My daughter stayed silent. Robert exhaled slowly. You want the law, not sympathy. The house is mine, I said. They've lived there 4 years without a lease. All expenses paid by me. I'm terminating the gratuitous use of the property. I'll draft a notice to quit. 30 days. That's fine, I said, and include a warning, back rent and penalties for holding over. Understood. I'll be at your office at 8. The cab stopped in front of the hotel. The doorman opened my door with more courtesy than I'd been shown in my own home in years. Can I help with your luggage? I only have my purse, I said, and my dignity. The room smelled of lavender and clean linen. I turned on the television, adjusted the volume exactly where I liked it, and ordered soup and a glass of wine. I ate slowly. That night, I slept like someone who had taken the wheel back. I woke before the alarm. The city still half asleep beyond the hotel curtains. For a moment, I lay still, listening to the unfamiliar quiet. No television blaring, no footsteps pacing the hallway, no sighs from the kitchen that meant someone was already irritated before breakfast. Just my breathing. I showered, dressed in the same clothes from the night before. But my posture was different. I wasn't moving around other people's moods anymore. I was moving towards something. Robert H. Caldwell's office was already awake when I arrived. The receptionist nodded with polite recognition. And within minutes, I was seated at the conference table. The documents were stacked neatly in front of me, notice of termination, proof of ownership, service instructions, paperwork I had reviewed thousands of times in my career, now bearing my own name. I signed slowly. Each stroke of the pen sounded louder than it should have, like a gavel striking wood. This will be personally served, Robert said, gesturing toward a young man standing near the door. Daniel Brooks. Quiet, professional. He doesn't argue, he just delivers reality. That's perfect, I said. Daniel nodded once. I'll be there within 20 minutes. I didn't go with him. Panic behaves better when it's alone. I waited in the reception area with a paper cup of coffee that smelled sweeter than it tasted. The clock on the wall ticked steadily. Somewhere across town, my living room was about to hear a different kind of knock. At 932, my phone vibrated. Emily. I let it ring 3 times before answering. Mom, she cried. There's a man at the door. He says he's an attorney. Jason is yelling. What is happening? Where are you? I held the phone slightly away from my ear to avoid Jason's shouting in the background. That's Daniel Brooks, I said calmly. Ask your husband to lower his voice. Take the papers. Read them. It says eviction. 30 days. Mom, have you lost your mind? For the first time in years, I said, I am completely sane. I ended the call. Robert appeared at the doorway, adjusting his glasses. Papers served. Signatures obtained. Inventory attached. Good, I said. Next step. He raised an eyebrow. Utilities? Yes, everything in my name. Internet, cable, sports package, landline, and suspend the supplementary credit card Emily uses. That will be noticed. Yesterday was painful, I said. Today will be felt. I took a small notebook from my purse and opened it on a clean page. The plan wrote itself. Law first, finances second, silence always. The phone buzzed again. Messages stacked up. Emily. Then Jason. I turned the screen face down. I stood. Is there a decent clothing store nearby? Robert smiled faintly. Gallery Mall. 2 blocks. I need a uniform. At the mall, the lighting was bright and neutral, designed to make decisions easier. A sales consultant named Jenna approached me, not too close, not condescending. How can I help you today? I need clothes that say I set boundaries, I replied. She didn't laugh. She nodded and disappeared among the racks. In the fitting room, I watched the transformation happen quietly. Dark blue trousers that straightened my stance. A crisp white blouse. A beige linen blazer that pulled everything together. Low leather pumps with a firm, audible heel. I folded my old clothes carefully. Please donate these, I told Jenna. They've served their purpose. I made my calls sitting on a cushioned bench outside the fitting room. One to the service provider. One to the bank. Each request clear, professional, irreversible. Within minutes, confirmations arrived. Transaction declined. Supplementary card blocked. Services suspended. I felt my stomach tighten, not from fear, but from the release of adrenaline. I ate lunch slowly at a quiet restaurant on the second floor. Mushroom risotto, a glass of white wine. My phone lay face down beside the plate. Then it vibrated. The cards aren't working. Call the bank. We're at the register. Jason. I picked up, calm as ever. It's not a malfunction, I said. It's a freeze. The credit expired yesterday, along with your privileges. I ended the call and finished my meal. Back at the hotel, I slept for an hour. The kind of rest that repairs something deep. When I woke, the landline rang. Your daughter is in the lobby. The receptionist said, she's asking to see you. Tell her I'll come down, I replied. In the mirror, I adjusted my blazer and glasses. The same face looked back at me, but the hesitation was gone. Emily was pacing between the couches. Her blouse wrinkled, her hair coming loose. When she saw me, she stopped short. Mom, she said, what are you doing? Sit, I said, pointing to an armchair. She obeyed. This is a respectable place. I continued, we will speak calmly. She tried a softer tone. The one used to soothe children and elders. Jason had a bad day. He already apologized. Let's go home. I'll make tea. I'm not offended, I said evenly. I've made a decision. Her face fell as I laid it out. The house, the notice, the utilities, the rules. You're humiliating us, she whispered. Humiliation is being sent to your room in your own house. I replied. Today, everyone pays their own bills. Her voice broke. If we leave, he'll divorce me. He said if he doesn't have your house, he doesn't want me. I leaned forward, placing my hand over hers. If your marriage depends on my square footage and my credit cards. That isn't love, that's a hostage situation. She pulled her hand away. Tears welling. You've become cruel. I've become an adult, I said. You're 40. It's time you became one too. Silence settled between us, heavy but honest. Tomorrow, I added, 10 a.m., at Robert Caldwell's office. Bring Jason. We'll let the documents speak. She stood slowly, searching my face for the old softness. It wasn't there. I'll be there, she said. I nodded. As she walked out of the lobby, I felt the tension drain, not relief, but alignment. Things were where they belonged now. Upstairs, I spread my keys on the nightstand. They sounded different, cleaner, lighter. Tomorrow would come, and for the first time, I wouldn't meet it by shrinking. The next morning arrived without ceremony. No alarm, no rush, just the steady light sliding through the hotel curtains like a blank page waiting for ink. I dressed carefully, not for battle, but for order. The beige blazer, pressed trousers, shoes polished enough to make a sound when I walked. I didn't need armor, I needed clarity. Robert H. Caldwell's office was cool. The air conditioning steady and impartial. The conference room smelled faintly of paper and coffee. I asked to sit at the head of the table. To my right, Robert placed his folder neatly, pen aligned with the edge. In front of me, my driver's license, the deed, the notice of termination. Nothing dramatic, just facts. At exactly 10 o'clock, the door opened. Jason Miller entered first. His confidence had cracked overnight. His shirt was wrinkled, tie loosened like an afterthought. Dark circles carved under his eyes. He pulled out a chair too loudly and sat without greeting. Emily followed, clutching her purse to her chest, eyes fixed on the floor. Please be seated, Robert said, his voice calm and final. I'm not here for a show. Jason snapped. We've lived there 4 years. We have rights. I waited, letting his voice hang in the air long enough to be heard. Rights are exactly why we're here, I said quietly. The house is my sole property. You are there by permission. That permission has been withdrawn. Jason scoffed. There's something called adverse possession. We lived openly as owners. I smiled faintly. Adverse possession applies when the owner doesn't live there, doesn't pay, and doesn't object. I live there, I pay, and I object. Robert nodded. The notice is valid. Service was executed properly. Upon expiration, eviction proceedings will begin, including recovery of fair market rent. This is illegal. Jason raised his voice. She cut off our internet. Our funds. Emotional distress. I'll sue. Internet is not a life-sustaining utility. Robert replied evenly. You're free to open an account in your own name. Jason turned to Emily. Tell her. She's destroying our family. Emily's lips trembled. She didn't speak. I slid a thin folder toward her. Let the paper speak. Over 4 years, I continued, you were supposedly saving for a condo. Living rent-free. Utilities paid. That's nearly $100,000. Where is it? Jason's jaw tightened. Investments. Business. I like specifics. I opened my envelope and laid out the documents. Loan default notices. A brokerage statement. A margin call. The balance below zero. Jason reached for them, but Robert's hand stopped him. Emily read silently. Her shoulders sank with each line. When she reached the end, one tear dropped onto the paper. Zero, she whispered. Yes, I said. There were no savings, only bets, and groceries charged to my card. I would have made it back. Jason barked. The market's turning. And that's why you needed my living room. I asked calmly. To lose louder? Silence. I stood. That movement alone straightened everyone's spine. Terms, I said. 30 days. No utilities restored. No cards. If there's shouting when I collect my belongings, I call the police. All further contact goes through counsel. Jason slumped back. Anger drained into fear. Emily covered her face. And one more thing, I said, turning to my daughter. This is your choice. Stay and drown, or step away and breathe. But if I have nowhere to go, she whispered. You work, you rent, you sell the car if you must. I replied, I am your mother, not your bank. Robert closed his folder. The meeting is concluded. As I passed Jason, I paused for half a second. You can control the remote in your own life, I said, but not in my house. Outside, the air felt cleaner. My phone vibrated. I didn't get in his car. Emily said softly. I walked away. Good, I replied. Don't rush back to noise. I hung up and raised my face to the sun. For the first time in years, I wasn't managing anyone else's chaos. That afternoon, I signed final paperwork and transferred everything into protected accounts. I turned off the family location app Jason had installed, for my safety. My dot on the map disappeared. That evening, I sat by the river with a glass of wine, watching light move across the water. No toasts, no celebration, just the quiet satisfaction of order restored. At the hotel, I opened my notebook and wrote a single line. Day 30. I won't be home. I slept deeply. On the 30th day, I was at a spa when Robert called. They're moving out. Inventory underway. At noon, another call. Keys handed over. Locks intact. They're gone. I stopped by a hardware store on the way back. Mop, gloves, cleaner. At the gate, the key turned easily, as if the house itself recognized me. Inside, the family room was empty. I opened every window. The air moved through, carrying out the last traces of someone else's noise. By evening, the floor was clean, the walls freshly painted peach. The silence wasn't empty, it was warm. I sat back in my green velvet armchair, picked up the remote, and turned the volume up one notch. Exactly as loud as I liked it. I didn't go home that night. I drove past the turn once, then kept going, letting the road decide for me. The spa parking lot had been quiet. Anonymous. No one there knew my history or expected anything from me. I checked into a small room, clean and spare, and slept with the window cracked just enough to hear the city breathe. In the morning, I woke without urgency. There was nothing to brace for. No moods to anticipate. I made coffee, drank it slowly, and read the same paragraph of the paper twice without losing my place. When I finally stood, it felt like standing on my own feet again, not someone else's expectations. By mid-morning, my phone chimed with a message from Robert Caldwell. Inventory complete. Minor wall damage. Moving truck departed. House secured. I replied with a single word. Thank you. I stopped at the paint store on the way back. The clerk asked what room I was painting. The family room, I said. What color? Peach, I answered, without hesitation. At the house, the gate opened smoothly. The lock turned like it had been waiting. Inside, the air was stale, heavy with the afterimage of someone else's life. I opened every window, front to back, and felt the draft sweep through, lifting curtains, stirring dust, carrying out what no longer belonged. I worked methodically, shelves first, then baseboards. I wiped the framed print of the Savannah riverfront and hung it lower, where it felt comfortable to me. The rug needed a stiff brush and patience. The floor took 2 rounds of warm water. Each motion felt like returning something to its proper place. By evening, the walls glowed softly. Peach didn't shout, it warmed. The kettle whistled. I poured tea and sat at the table alone, listening to the house settle. Pipes clicked. The refrigerator hummed. Ordinary sounds, finally unchallenged. The doorbell rang once. Polite, brief. I knew who it was. Come in, Emily, I said through the door. She stepped inside slowly, looking around as if entering a new space. Her eyes paused on the walls, the cleared shelves, the open windows. It's quiet, she said. It's mine, I replied. We sat across from each other with 2 mugs between us. She held hers with both hands, drawing warmth from it. I rented a studio, she said. Small, loud neighbor upstairs, but it's mine. I pay for it myself. I nodded. I filed for divorce, she continued. The paperwork started. I didn't congratulate her. I didn't console her. I let the words stand. He says you broke up the family, she added, almost testing the air. I stopped feeding a lie, I said. She smiled faintly. When the internet went out, it was like the noise finally stopped. I could hear myself. We sat quietly, outside. The garden rustled in the evening breeze. Can I come over sometimes? She asked. As a guest. No keys, no staying over, just tea. That's exactly how it should be, I said. She stood, hugged me briefly, the way adults do, and left without looking back. Later that night, my phone lit up with a message from Zoe. Betty's son is pressuring her to sign the house over. She's scared to say no. Can we come by tomorrow? Come at 4, I typed. Bring papers. The next afternoon, the kettle was ready, the table set with pens, blank sheets, and envelopes. Zoe arrived first, then Olga, guiding Betty in by the elbow. Betty's shoulders were hunched, her eyes red. They say it's an investment, she said, that I'll get a better house later. I poured tea and slid a paper toward her. As long as you're alive, the house stays yours. If you want to leave something, write a will. Don't sign ownership away while you're breathing. We wrote phrases together, simple ones that didn't invite argument. I am not ready to change ownership. I need time to think. No. By the end, Betty sat straighter. When they left, the house felt fuller, not noisier. Emily stopped by again that evening, knocking like a guest. She traced the peach wall with her fingertips. You know, she said, I miss your no. I spent my whole life learning your yes. The no isn't punishment, I replied. It's a boundary. She nodded and left, her steps steady. Later, an unknown number blinked on my phone. I recognized it without reading. I pressed block and set the phone down. I walked through the house slowly. The documents were stacked neatly. The armchair waited. I sat and picked up the remote. It felt light now, just a tool. I turned on the music and adjusted the volume by 1 notch. Enough. The house breathed around me. No footsteps, no orders, just space. For the first time in years, I wasn't renting out my life. I was home. The house settled into a rhythm that night, the kind that doesn't announce itself. Pipes ticked once, then went quiet. The refrigerator hummed steadily. Outside, a branch brushed the window and moved on. Nothing demanded my attention. Nothing needed fixing. In the morning, I woke without an alarm and made oatmeal, coffee, and a glass of water. I sat at the table and read the news all the way through. Somewhere across town, other people argued about trivial things. In my life, the main headlines had already been published. Before noon, I stopped by Robert Caldwell's office to sign the final documents, handover confirmations, inventory acknowledgments, and Daniel Brooks's power of attorney for the last procedural details. It was brief and professional. "You did the right thing, Margaret," Robert said as he closed the folder. "I did what was mine," I replied. Outside, the sun was warm. I went to the salon next. I wanted my hair to match my spine. The stylist trimmed the tired ends and polished the gray until it shone like clean silver. In the mirror, I saw the same face. But the gaze no longer waited for permission. On my way home, I stood at a red light and smiled. Order made everything simpler, on the road and in a house. That afternoon, a message from Daniel confirmed the schedule. Day 30, 8 a.m., inventory, locks, keys. I placed the phone back in my purse and didn't think about it again. On the 30th day, I wasn't home. I drove out of the city early, checked into a quiet spa, and left my phone face down on the bedside table. Steam, water, herbal tea. I stared at the ceiling and thought of only one thing. Tonight, I would open the windows and wash the floor. That was all. At 11, my phone vibrated once. Daniel's voice was calm. They signed. Keys handed over. Inventory complete. Minor wall damage. They're gone. "Thank you," I said, and hung up. I stopped at a hardware store on the way back. Gloves, a mop, rags, floor cleaner. The clerk asked if I needed help finding anything else. "No," I said. "I know exactly what I'm doing." At the gate, the key turned easily, as if the house recognized me. Inside, the family room was empty. Marks where furniture had stood. Holes where screens had been mounted. Air that hadn't moved freely in years. I opened every window. The draft swept through, from kitchen to garden, stirring curtains, lifting dust, carrying out the remnants of someone else's noise. I put on the gloves and began. Shelves first, then baseboards, corners where dust liked to hide. I wiped the Savannah riverfront print and hung it lower, where it felt right to me. The floor took warm water twice. The rug needed a stiff brush and patience. The house responded to every movement, like something waking up. By evening, the kettle whistled. I turned it off and listened to the quiet. Not empty, finished. The next day, the painter arrived at 9 sharp. By late afternoon, the walls were peach again, soft and warm. I paid him, thanked him, and closed the door behind him. The bell rang once more, polite and brief. "Come in, Emily," I said. She stepped inside slowly, eyes taking in the space. "It's beautiful," she said, warm. "A house should be," I replied. We sat at the table with coffee and a slice of pie. She held her mug with both hands. "I moved into the studio," she said. "Full-time work is steady. The divorce is progressing." I nodded. "I don't want supplementary cards anymore," she added. "I pay myself." "That's how adults live," I said. She hesitated, then smiled slightly. "Can I still come as a guest?" "No keys, no staying over, just tea." "The door is open for guests," I replied. "It's closed for tenants." She understood. We hugged briefly, cleanly. When she left, she walked straight, not looking back. That evening, I opened my notebook and wrote a simple plan. Wednesday, 4 p.m. Tea. Papers. Questions. The next day, Zoe came with Olga and Betty. Betty looked frightened when she arrived, hunched and apologetic. "My son wants me to sign the house over," she said. "He says it's an investment." We sat. We poured tea. We talked about wills, separate accounts, passwords, and the power of the word no. We wrote short phrases she could repeat without explanation. By the end, Betty sat straighter. "I feel lighter," she said as she left. "So you should," I replied. That night, Emily stopped by again, knocking softly. "You know," she said, tracing the peach wall, "if you hadn't turned off the utilities, I never would have heard myself." "Hearing yourself is adult life," I said. She smiled and left. Later, an unknown number flashed on my phone. I pressed block without hesitation. I walked through the house, kitchen, hallway, Family room. My documents were stacked neatly. The armchair waited. I sat down and picked up the remote. It was just a thing now. No longer a symbol. I turned on the music and raised the volume by one notch. Exactly as loud as I liked it. The house breathed steadily around me. Outside, the garden darkened. Inside, everything was in its place. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't living in someone else's shadow. I wasn't explaining. I wasn't shrinking. I was home. By Wednesday afternoon, the house had learned a new schedule. At 3:45, I filled the kettle and laid out the documents on the dining table. Pens aligned, blank sheets stacked, envelopes ready. The peach walls caught the light and softened it. The way good rooms do. Not decorative, functional, calm. At 4 sharp, the bell rang. Zoe came first, brisk and purposeful, a notebook already tucked under her arm. Olga followed, adjusting her scarf, eyes scanning the room with approval. Betty arrived last, moving slower than the others, shoulders rounded from years of apologizing for existing. She stopped just inside the doorway. "It smells nice," she said, surprised. "Peach cobbler," I replied. "Sit." We gathered around the table. Steam curled up from the mugs. Outside, the garden rustled lightly, as if eavesdropping without judgment. "My son wants me to sign the house over to him," Betty said again, quieter this time. "He says it's an investment. That he'll buy me something better later." I nodded, not reacting. "As long as you're alive. The house is yours. Gifting it now is forever. You can't take it back because someone changes their mind." Zoe leaned forward. "My cousin did that. Ended up renting a room in her own house." Betty flinched. "We're not here to scare you," I said. "We're here to slow things down." I slid a blank sheet toward Betty and wrote a single sentence at the top. "I am not ready to change ownership." "Say this," I told her, word for word. "Don't explain. Don't argue. If he raises his voice, leave the room." Olga nodded. "And never sign anything on weekends or holidays. Offices are closed for a reason." We talked through wills, how they could be changed while deeds could not. Separate accounts, passwords that belonged to one person only, receipts for any money lent, even to family, especially to family. Betty listened, her hands steadying on the mug. When she spoke again, her voice was firmer. "I didn't know I could just say no." "You can," I said. "No is not rude. It's a full sentence." By the time they left, Betty stood straighter. Zoe hugged me at the door. "We'll make this a weekly thing," she said. "There are more of us than you think." After they went, I washed the cups slowly and wiped the table. The house felt used properly, like a place where something honest had happened. Emily came by later that evening. She knocked and waited. "Can I come in?" she asked. "You already did the right thing by knocking," I replied. She stepped inside, looking around with a softer gaze. "I signed the lease today. 1 year, my own account, my own bills." "That's how it starts," I said. She hesitated, then laughed quietly. "You know what's strange? I miss your no. I spent my whole life learning your yes." "The yes is easy," I said. "The no teaches you where you end." She stayed for tea, then left before it got too late. She didn't ask for a key. That night, I opened my notebook again and wrote at the top of a clean page the house. The owner's story. I wrote about how fear disguises itself as care. How habit can drown out your voice. How one sentence, "Go to your room, old woman," can expose an entire structure built on silence. I wrote that documents don't shout, but they restore spines. That unplugged internet can turn on a mind. I closed the notebook and put it away. The phone buzzed once. An unknown number. I let it ring, then pressed block without listening. I walked through the house slowly, touching familiar things. The table, the window frame, the back of the green velvet armchair. I sat down and picked up the remote. It was just plastic and buttons. No weight beyond what I gave it. I turned on the television and found a music channel. A violin filled the room. Clean and steady. I closed my eyes and raised the volume by one notch. Exactly as loud as I liked it. No footsteps followed. No one turned it off. The house breathed with me. Pipes clicked once. Somewhere outside, a branch moved in the wind. Ordinary sounds. Mine. I leaned back and listened. Not waiting for interruption. Not bracing for correction. Just listening. Enough, I said aloud. And for the first time. The word didn't mean endurance. It meant ownership. The volume. The silence. The people at my table. All of it was finally mine. Thursday morning arrived quietly, the kind that doesn't demand proof you're alive. I woke before the kettle clicked on its own habit and lay still for a moment. Listening to the house. It answered back the way a well-kept place does, steady. Neutral. Unconcerned with anyone's drama. I made coffee and stood by the window, watching a neighbor walk a dog that pulled too hard on the leash. Even that felt familiar again. Ordinary life had returned. After breakfast, I opened the notebook once more. Wednesday at 4 had worked. The women had left lighter. Not because their problems were solved, but because they now had language. Language is often the first form of shelter. I added a line beneath the heading. Next week bring tax statements. The phone rang mid-morning. I recognized Emily's number and answered on the second ring. I blocked him, she said without greeting. Every account, every number. Good, I replied. You can't heal while answering sirens. She exhaled. He showed up at my studio last night. Pounded on the door. I didn't open it. What did you do instead? I sat on the floor and waited until he left. I smiled slightly. That's restraint. It grows. There was a pause on the line. Mom, she said, quieter. Were you ever afraid of being alone? I considered the question honestly. Yes, until I realized it's worse to be in a place where you don't exist. She was silent for a moment, absorbing that. I'll see you Sunday, she said, as a guest. I'll make tea, I replied. When the call ended, I didn't rush to fill the space it left behind. Silence no longer made me nervous. It meant nothing was wrong. In the afternoon, I walked through the house again. Not to inspect it, but to inhabit it. I opened drawers I hadn't used in years. I moved a lamp 3 inches to the left. I lowered a shelf because my shoulder preferred it that way. Small decisions, once deferred, now reclaimed. The green velvet armchair remained where it had always been, angled just enough to catch the late light. I ran my hand over the worn fabric and sat. Outside, the garden shifted in a mild breeze. Inside, the clock ticked softly, no longer keeping score. A message blinked onto my phone from Daniel Brooks. Day 30 inventory closed. No further action required. I replied with a short acknowledgement and set the phone face down. Later, a different message arrived. Zoe again. Betty said no. He yelled. She left the room like you told her. Good, I typed back. No one ever died from a raised voice. As evening settled, I prepared a simple dinner and ate at the table, not balancing a plate on my lap or timing bites around someone else's schedule. When I finished, I washed the dish immediately and dried it, returning it to its place. Nothing waited, nothing piled up. I turned on the television and found a documentary I liked. The narrator spoke evenly, without urgency. I adjusted the volume, then adjusted it again, until it matched the room instead of fighting it. At one point, I reached for the remote instinctively, as if expecting resistance. There was none. I leaned back and let the program play. The doorbell rang just after sunset, brief and respectful. Emily stood on the porch, hands in her pockets, shoulders squared. I remembered to knock, she said. You always do now, I replied, stepping aside. She came in and sat across from me, glancing around as if still confirming the house would remain itself. I talked to my lawyer today, she said. He says I should have left sooner. That's easy to say after, I replied. She nodded. I'm learning something strange. I used to confuse peace with guilt. If no one was angry, I thought I was doing something wrong. And now? And now, she said slowly. Quiet feels like breathing. We drank tea without rushing. She left before it grew late, hugging me once at the door. No clinging, no bargaining. After she went, I turned off the lights one by one and paused in the hallway. The house felt complete, not because everything was perfect, but because nothing was stolen from it anymore. In my study, I opened the notebook and added another paragraph, about how love without boundaries is just habit wearing a soft face. About how generosity becomes dangerous when it's unnamed. About how saying no at the right moment saves years of repair. I closed the notebook and slid it back into the drawer. Before bed, I stood once more in the family room. The peach walls held the light gently. The armchair waited. The remote lay on the table. Unremarkable. I picked it up, turned off the television, and sat in the quiet I had chosen. The house breathed. So did I. And for the first time in a long while, there was nothing left to correct. Friday brought rain, the soft kind that doesn't hurry anyone. I woke to it tapping against the window and stayed in bed longer than usual. Listening, rain had always felt like permission to slow down, to stay put, to let the world carry itself for a while. When I finally stood, I didn't rush the morning. Toast browned evenly, coffee steamed, the radio murmured low, a voice somewhere between news and music. I left it there, neither loud nor quiet, just present. After breakfast, I pulled the folder from the shelf and checked the contents. Deed, will, account statements, password list sealed in an envelope. Everything in its place, not hidden, not flaunted, simply arranged. At 10, the phone rang, an unfamiliar number this time. I let it ring twice before answering. Mrs. Whitman, a man's voice said carefully. This is a mediator from Miller & Cross. Jason Miller has requested. I'm not interested, I replied calmly. He's asking for a conversation. Closure. There is no unfinished sentence. I said, please put everything in writing. The line went quiet for a second. Then, understood. I hung up and set the phone down. No shaking, no triumph, just completion. In the afternoon, I walked to the mailbox and noticed how differently my feet met the ground. Slower, certain. The house no longer felt like something I needed to defend. It was simply where I lived. A handwritten note waited inside. The envelope slightly creased. Betty's handwriting. Thank you for teaching me the word no. I used it today. He yelled. I didn't. I feel taller. I smiled and placed the note on the table. Emily came by later, earlier than usual. She stood on the porch. Rain dotted in her hair. I didn't plan to stop, she said, but I was nearby. You're always welcome as a guest, I replied. She sat at the table while I made tea. I sold the car, she said, paid off the last credit card. It feels strange, not having a cushion. You have legs, I said. They're stronger than cushions. She laughed, a short sound, then grew serious. He sent me an email. Long, apologetic, angry, all at once. What did you do? I read it once, she said, then I closed it. That's enough, I replied. We drank tea while the rain slowed outside. She left before dark, hugging me gently, her grip steady. That evening, I moved through the house, switching lamps on as needed, off where they weren't. I noticed how much of my life before had been spent adjusting to avoid reactions. Lowering voices, shrinking gestures, planning exits. Now, nothing reacted. I sat in the armchair and turned on the television. A concert was playing, strings rising and falling without urgency. I closed my eyes and let it fill the room. For years, I had confused endurance with virtue, staying quiet with being kind, letting things slide with being loving. It took one sentence, go to your room, old woman, to strip those illusions clean. The volume was just right. Later, as I prepared for bed, I passed the mirror in the hallway and paused. The woman looking back at me hadn't changed much. Same lines, same gray, but her shoulders were set differently. Her eyes didn't scan for permission. I brushed my hair slowly, methodically, and turned off the light. In the dark, the house settled around me like a held breath finally released. No footsteps, no sudden clicks, no commands. Just rain fading outside, and the steady presence of walls that belonged to me. I slept without dreaming. And when morning came, it felt like something continuing, not ending, not beginning, simply continuing, on my terms. Saturday arrived clear and bright. The rain scrubbed clean from the streets. Sunlight spilled through the kitchen window and settled on the table, exactly where it pleased. I stood there a moment longer than necessary, watching dust float lazily in the air. Nothing in the house was in a hurry. I made breakfast and ate it slowly. then carried my mug into the family room and sat in the green velvet armchair. The fabric held my shape like it always had. Familiar. Patient. I turned on the television. Not because I needed the noise, but because I wanted it. A morning music program filled the room. Gentle and unforced. I adjusted the volume once and left it there. The phone buzzed on the side table. Emily. I'm at Zoe's, she said. She made pancakes. Betty's here too. We were talking. About what? I asked. About things we didn't know we were allowed to ask. She replied. Accounts. Wills. Boundaries. Zoe says she wants to come Wednesday again. Tell her 4 o'clock, I said. Sharp. There was a pause. Then a small laugh. You really mean it, don't you? This is a thing now. It's a habit, I corrected. Like brushing your teeth. You do it before decay sets in. She exhaled. I wish I'd seen this sooner. You saw it when you were ready. I said. That's how it works. After the call, I spent the afternoon doing nothing in particular. I rearranged a shelf in the study. Set aside old magazines. Watered the plants in the garden. The soil was dark and damp from yesterday's rain. The smell clean and grounding. A knock sounded at the door. Not the bell. A knock. I opened it to find a neighbor I recognized but hadn't spoken to much. A woman about my age with careful hair and a hesitant smile. I'm sorry to bother you, she said. Zoe mentioned you helped her friend. I'm having trouble with my son. I stepped aside. Come in. We sat at the table with tea between us. She spoke in short bursts, as if afraid the words would scatter if she let them run too long. A request to co-sign a loan. A suggestion to put the house in his name, for convenience. Raised voices. Guilt wrapped in concern. I listened without interrupting. When she finished, I folded my hands. You don't need a new reason, I said. The old one will do. I'm not comfortable with that. She looked relieved and frightened at the same time. That's all? That's all, I said. If he pushes, repeat it, calmly. You don't owe explanations for your boundaries. She nodded, eyes damp. Thank you. After she left, I stood in the doorway a moment, watching her walk down the path, her steps already a little straighter. The rest of the day passed gently. I cooked something simple for dinner and ate by the window as the light shifted toward evening. Children's voices floated from somewhere down the street, then faded. That night, I sat in the family room again, remote in hand. It struck me how small it was. A piece of plastic that had once ruled the room simply because I allowed it to. Power often looks like nothing at all when you pick it up. I turned the television off before the program ended and sat in the quiet instead. The house didn't protest. Before bed, I opened my notebook and added a few more lines. About how control often hides behind familiarity. About how silence can be chosen or imposed. And the difference between the two is everything. About how a house becomes dangerous when the owner stops taking up space inside it. I closed the notebook and slid it back into the drawer. In the hallway, I turned off the last light and paused. Listening. Pipes. Wind. The faint hum of electricity doing its job without complaint. I went to bed and slept deeply. The kind of sleep that doesn't brace itself against tomorrow. When I woke, I already knew what Sunday would be like. Quiet. Intentional. Mine. Sunday morning arrived without an alarm. Without insistence. Light filtered through the curtains evenly. Like a sheet of paper before a signature. I lay still for a moment, listening to the house breathe. There was no anticipation in the air. No tension waiting to be managed. Just space. I made breakfast and ate it at the table. Then carried my coffee into the family room. The green velvet armchair welcomed me the way it always had. Patient and familiar. I sat down and let my weight settle fully. Without apology. The remote lay on the end table. I picked it up, turned on the television, and found a music channel. A violin filled the room. Clean and unhurried. I adjusted the volume once. Then again, slightly, exactly where I wanted it. No one came in to turn it off. I closed my eyes and listened, not just to the music, but to everything underneath it. Pipes moving water. A branch brushing the window. The soft hum of electricity. Ordinary sounds, finally uninterrupted. For years, I had mistaken endurance for love. I believed that if I stayed quiet enough, useful enough, small enough, harmony would follow. I told myself that sacrifice was what kept families together. That discomfort was the price of belonging. It took one sentence to strip that illusion away. Go to your room, old woman. That wasn't anger speaking. It was entitlement, fully formed and unashamed. And once spoken aloud, it revealed the truth I had been circling for years without naming. I had slowly been erased from my own life. Not through force, but through habit. I opened my eyes and looked around the room. The peach walls held the light gently. The Savannah riverfront print hung where it was comfortable for me, not where it impressed anyone. The rug lay flat and clean beneath my feet. Nothing made noise unless I invited it to. Ownership, I had learned, wasn't just about deeds and keys. It was about presence, about choosing where you sit, what you hear, and when you speak. In the afternoon, I boiled the kettle again. At 4 o'clock sharp, the doorbell rang. Zoe arrived with Olga, followed by Betty and 2 other women I hadn't met before. They entered hesitantly at first, glancing around as if expecting judgment. I waved them in. Sit, I said. Tea's ready. We gathered around the table with notebooks open. Questions came slowly at first, then faster. About wills, about accounts, about how to say no without shaking, about how to survive the silence that follows. I answered what I could and listened when I couldn't. There was no performance in it, just information, passed hand to hand like something practical and necessary. When they left, they didn't leave quietly, they left straighter. Later that evening, Emily came by. She knocked and waited, even though she knew I would open the door. She stepped inside and paused in the family room. It still feels different, she said. It should, I replied. She sat across from me, hands wrapped around her mug. I blocked him everywhere, she said. I'm tired, but clear. Clarity costs energy, I said, but it saves time. She smiled faintly. I keep thinking about that day, when he told you to go to your room. I nodded. If you hadn't stood up then, she continued, I don't think I ever would have. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand once. You didn't need me to save you, I said. You needed permission to save yourself. She stayed a little while longer, then stood. Can I come Wednesday again? As a guest. You're always welcome as a guest, I replied. When she left, I locked the door behind her, not because I was afraid, but because I could. That night, I walked through the house one last time before bed. Kitchen, hallway, family room, everything where it belonged. My documents rested neatly in the study. The notebook lay closed in the drawer. I sat in the armchair again and turned off the television. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was complete. Enough, I said softly. And I understood then that the word had changed. It no longer meant tolerance or survival. It meant choice. Enough noise. Enough shrinking. Enough living as a guest in my own home. I went to bed and slept deeply. In the morning, the house woke with me. I made coffee, opened the window slightly, and let the city in only as much as I wanted. The keys lay on the counter, just one set now. No duplicates, no confusion. I picked them up. The metal was warm. For a long time, I had believed that love required access. That family meant unlimited entry, unlimited patience, unlimited forgiveness. I know better now. Love without boundaries is not love. Silence chosen is peace. Silence imposed is erasure. I sat back down in the family room, picked up the remote, and turned the music on again. The volume was exactly right. This house was mine. But more importantly, so was my life. And from now on, nothing would be turned off without my permission.